This is the Recruit the Employer podcast, and you're listening to episode 101. The Career Map Journal is here. Welcome to the Recruit the Employer podcast, a show for the ambitious, action-oriented career woman who wants to live out her purpose, rise to the top of her industry, and be seen as a leader at work. In 30 minutes or less, we'll walk you through the latest strategies to land your dream job, blast through imposter syndrome, and make the money you deserve. I'm your host, Jenna Viviano, ex-Wall Streeter turned career coach and founder of Recruit the Employer. But more importantly, I'm on a mission to help you fall in love with your work again. So grab a glass of wine, get ready to be coached, and tune in to your weekly boost of career confidence. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Recruit the Employer podcast. Today is a very special bonus episode where we are officially, it is May 4th, we are officially launching the Career Map Journal. So tomorrow you're going to have your normally scheduled programming of an awesome episode relating to networking. So I want you to tune in again tomorrow. But today, for those devotees that have been listening to the Recruit the Employer podcast for a while, who've been following me, who've been hearing me talk about this dang journal for forever, the day has come where you, the public, everybody that's a part of this community, can actually purchase it for yourself. So if you've already heard all the things, you've listened to the podcast episodes where I talk about journaling, the importance of journaling and the Career Map Journal in general, and you're just like, Jenna, I'm ready to go. Get me this journal. You can go to recruittheemployer.com/journal and just exit out of the rest of this conversation. But for those of you that want to learn a little bit more, why did you create a journal, Jenna? Why do you think journaling is super important to people in their careers, but specifically women in their careers? You want to stay tuned for the rest of this episode. I'm going to talk a little bit about why journaling is important, not only from what I've seen, but what some research has shown as well. Number two, I'm going to share with you why I created the Career Map Journal. I'm going to share some stories about my own needs that I felt like weren't being met in the marketplace. And then I'm also going to share with you some things that I was noticing with a lot of clients that you can probably identify with as well. The third thing we're going to talk about is what's actually in the journal. So I'm going to walk you through who is this for? What do the pages look like? What can you expect when you purchase this? And then finally, I'm going to share a little bit, I'll give you a behind the scenes look of what I learned from the experience of actually creating a physical product. So even if you're not somebody who's entrepreneurial in nature, you're going to learn a lot about where I failed. I have a really interesting, very awful story about a place where I really failed in creating this journal and what I learned from it and what you can too learn from it. So I don't want to give any spoilers. I want you to listen into the end for that little sneak peek, but let's get started. I'm looking at the journal as I'm talking, and guys, I gotta say, I know I created this, but our designers did such a great job of making this look professional, of making it small enough that it can fit inside your purse and you're not lugging around this huge journal. So I'm going to share a little bit more about the design, why we decided on that, but it's just beautiful and it looks beautiful on my desk. And I can't wait for you guys to get your hands on it as well. So let's talk a little bit about journaling. Why journaling? And I actually found this Harvard Business Review article that's titled The 4 Reasons to Keep a Work Diary. It's by Teresa Amabile and Steve Kramer. I may have pronounced their names a little bit wrong, but they stated in their article that there are 4 reasons why they believe journaling is really important, and where they've seen people as far as Oprah Winfrey to General George Patton, they've all used diaries and trying to understand why are people using diaries? What's the work diaries? What's the benefit of it? And they gave 4 specific reasons. And I thought this was really interesting. Number 1 was focus. Number 2 was patience. Number 3 was planning. And number 4 was personal growth. And I would like to add a 5th in there that I have just seen for myself personally, and then also for clients that have enacted kind of some of these journaling principles in their daily life as it relates to their career, is emotional health. Emotional health. I believe journaling can help decrease stress, increase satisfaction in your work, with your relationships, and help you really get into a state of reflection that is healthy and normal. Our journals, and I'm going to get into this a little bit about why I created this journals, our careers are really emotional, y'all. You hear me talk about this a lot, but our careers are not transactional. It's not like you just go in, clock out anymore. It very much touches and has tentacles on every part of our identity, our value system, our purpose. It's attached to our money. It's attached to our lifestyle. It's attached to what people think about us. I mean, there's so many pieces to it. So obviously work is really emotional. And when we neglect the emotional side of work, we're neglecting a whole area where we can be developing, improving, developing in our leadership, developing in our personal growth, and just growing in general. And I know if you're listening to this podcast, that's important to you. You're not listening to a career-based podcast if you're not interested in growing yourself. So that's one of the main reasons that I would actually recommend journaling. And so in this article, they talk about how they've kind of worked with some people before. And there's a woman who created Swell. Her name is Sarah Koss. I'm going to read this from her, kind of from an excerpt from the article that I was mentioning. And she talked about how she had first rebelled against the idea of keeping a journal. And she said at the time, as a busy MBA student, because that's when it was recommended to her by the author of this article, she said, at the time as a busy MBA student, this seemed uncomfortable and time consuming. I needed to be working and networking, not taking time to write about perceptions and feelings, or so I thought. Professor Amabile's assignment introduced me to an entirely new type of journaling that has helped me in both my personal and professional life. And I just love that. I think it's really, really important for us to identify that journaling not only can help us, it feels like one of those things that's like, oh, I'll get to it when I get to. But journaling can actually be the foundation to help you be more successful in your workplace, to be more successful in your, in the political relationships that often happen in a corporation or an organization, whether you're in a startup, a nonprofit, you're working in ministry, or you're working in a corporation, whether you're new in your career, whether you're old in your career, journaling is a really, really great habit to get into. And so one person said in this article too, that they noticed that when they were reflecting on their journal, they said, I saw my comments seem to reflect a pessimistic tone, which in retrospect may have been unwarranted. I now try to approach projects with a more optimistic frame of mind. So journaling is incredibly valuable for our own growth. I can say for myself personally, anecdotally, that when I am more consistently journaling, because I'm going to be totally straight with you guys, I am not always great at journaling. When I am good at journaling, when I'm consistent with it, I can notice that there is a change in my perception of what's going on. I am more introspective in a healthy way, not in a self-deprecating way. And I'm able to get more progress and breakthrough in the things that I feel like I'm struggling with. My mindset shifts in a better direction. I'm growing. And so journaling for your career, I believe, is really imperative for you to understand what have you done, what goals have you reached, to be patient throughout the process, to plan for the future, and ultimately to process through your emotions so you can live a healthier, happier, thriving existence at work. And who doesn't want that, right? You're listening to this podcast because you're probably unhappy with your work right now. And you either A, don't know why, B, you don't know where to go next, or C, you're just thinking, man, there's got to be more. Maybe I'm content with where I'm at, but I want to keep pushing myself to grow. A journaling practice is going to be really helpful for you, which leads me to why I created the Career Map Journal. I needed it for myself. And that may sound selfish, probably does a little bit, but there was a need there for myself. And I didn't find anything on the market that directly related to my career. I saw ones that were related to health and wellness or just general planning, like planners, but there wasn't a space or there wasn't a journal that I found where I could really reflect on my experience to keep track of what I'd been doing in a way that didn't feel overwhelming. Most of the journals or most of the planners, I'm going to actually use the word planner because planners are different, I believe, than journals. Most of the planners that I found were just really stressful. I would feel like a failure at the end of every week because I didn't fill in all the boxes or I didn't check all the things off. And I never finished them, or they were dated and I felt like, oh, I missed these 3 weeks. I might as well just, give this to somebody else or forget about the journal. I have so many unfinished journals. So I saw a need for it where there was an undated journal that was simple. It was practical, but it also allowed opportunities to process through emotions, to understand and ask really prompted, guided questions to help people understand, what do I actually want in my career? What's not working right now? And what potentially could be possible for me? So many of my clients needed a tool like this. So number one, I needed it. And number two, I saw that my clients needed it too. Even when I brought it up into some of my clients, like, hey, I'm trying this thing out. What do you guys think about it? They're like, oh my gosh, please create that. And so when people tell me to please create it and keep on bugging me about it, I know that I probably need to create it. So there was a market for it. So as a business owner, I'm thinking about not only is this something cool to have, is this something nice to have, but is it going to be sellable? And I knew that there were a lot of people in my community who maybe couldn't invest in one of our long-term programs, either financially or just from a time perspective. And that this was one way for us to get further connected and to quote unquote work together without technically hopping on a phone call. And the other thing with it is when I saw what else was on the market, what else was available, it was kind of, I don't know. I wanted to be a little bit more feminine. I wanted to be a little bit more excited about getting to journal every week instead of feeling like it was a chore that I had to get to. The other thing is I like to lug my life around in my bag. And so I didn't like all the journals that were super heavy and like super hardcore, huge. And I was unnecessary. So I really designed this career map journal to be purse-sized. So it's intended to fit in your purse, to go with you wherever you go so that you don't forget about it, so that you take the time out for yourself. Okay. You take the time out for yourself, because I can assure you that if you spend that time, it doesn't have to be anything big. It can be 10 to 15 minutes a week. Literally. That is it. That's all. You can all do that, right? 10 to 15 minutes a week to plan and to reflect on your week. That is all you need to keep the needle going forward, to feel like you've accomplished something and to ultimately process through emotions. So that's the other piece of the puzzle, where I saw that a lot of these journals were just maybe blank, or they were like more like planners, but there wasn't really a mixture. And I was noticing that a lot of my clients were coming to me, and I am not a therapist. So let me repeat again, I'm not a therapist, but I was playing therapist in a lot of different situations, in the sense that we would talk through a lot of the emotions of work. So people thought they were coming to me just for a strategy, and they realized that it was so much bigger than that. It was about mindset. It was about belief structure. It was like, oh, I haven't done anything this year. There was a lot of these narratives that were happening with my clients that I started to realize, wow, work is not transactional. Work is incredibly emotional. We talked about that already. And so how do I create a space for people to process through those emotions regularly so it doesn't build up and there is an explosion? And so it doesn't build up and my clients get burnt out. How do I create a space for them to process through those emotions that feel safe, secure, and like you have freedom to process through your emotions, because it's normal to have emotions around work? I get a lot of people who will come to me and just, I'll get a response from somebody who listened to a podcast episode and it was like, thank you for telling me it's okay to have emotions about this. Like, this is hard. This feels really hard right now. And that's okay, because if we don't acknowledge that and just kind of keep on, and I'm very much like a pull yourself up by your bootstraps type of girl, but if we keep doing that, we're not going to allow ourselves to settle in a little bit, and we're going to have these really tight shoulders, right? You can just see the visual of just like keeping on pulling up your bootstraps, but not allowing yourself the freedom and flexibility to honor your emotions. I think both things are really important. And we have a lot of people who are feeling, especially my ladies, feel a lot of shame that there's emotion around work, that they feel like a failure, like they feel like things aren't working, and they have no place or no outlet to discuss that. And so a journal is a really great private place to do that. I've done it for myself, and it's helped me work through things. It's helped me uncover like where my roadblocks are, what I was believing about myself that just wasn't true, or different aspects of my career that I really wanted to think about, focus on. Journaling really helped me do that. The other thing that I noticed with clients is by the time we got to their resume, right? I asked them, okay, what have you done in the past year? They're like, I don't know. I don't know what I've done. Maybe can you give me some prompts about what I should be thinking about, right? So it was so interesting because so many people had no idea what they'd actually accomplished. And I was like, that's a really big problem that we can solve for. That is an easy fix. So this journal actually has a space where on a weekly basis, you're going to be reflecting on what did I accomplish this week? What am I proud of? What's my work win? That's what we call it in the journal. What's your work win? And so that by the end of the year, you can literally have a book, a journal that includes all of the things that you've done this year. So that when it comes time to write your resume, it's easy peasy. You have a whole book. When you go to a resume writer or you go to a coach or you do it yourself, you can literally say, okay, I have all this information. These are the projects I worked on. I can reflect on that. And that is amazing. That is a great, great asset that I realized that people did not have for themselves. They were not keeping track of what they accomplished. And so they either felt like they'd never accomplished anything, or they had accomplished too much that they just they got so overwhelmed when it came time to do their resume. Which, by the way, if you've heard me talk before, I'm going to recommend you do your resume more than once a year. So I'll just slide that little bonus thing in there. The other thing that people were not doing well was talking about their failures. or not owning their failures and thinking that failure meant that you were a failure, that failing at something equaled you are a failure. And I'm going to share with you a little bit later in this episode about my personal failure with this journal and how I'm coming to you humbly and owning it, and how I think that it will give you permission to make mistakes as well. So I realized that people were not thinking about, what am I failing at? And to just acknowledge that it's okay to fail because we're human. So there's a space in the journal for that. And then finally, the last thing that I felt like people were not doing well is they weren't setting aside the time to network. Tomorrow's episode is all about networking. The career map journal is going to go hand in hand with this. This is going to give you a space and give you a reminder to think about, who am I going to connect with this week? Who am I going to have a conversation with? Who am I going to try and reach out to, so that you are not only networking when you need something, but we need a reminder, right? We need a reminder every week to do that. And so the journal is intended to help you keep track of all of that information. So that's really why I created the career map journal. I realized that there were too many complicated options on the market. Many of them were centered towards what men were interested in, which a man can totally use this career map journal, but I definitely tailored it and created it for my female audience. So if you have some men on your team, they definitely would get some benefit from this. But I will say that I did cater it more towards my female audience and the struggles that I knew that they were facing, whether they were new in their career, middle in their career, or senior level executives. This journal is going to help you no matter where you are on the spectrum. It's going to make you a more self-aware human. It's going to make you realize what you actually want to do. And then it's going to help you realize what you've actually done. So if that sounds interesting to you, you know where to find it, recruittheemployer.com/journal. We're going to have that stuff in the show notes. But I want to talk a little bit about specifically what's in the journal. So I kind of mentioned it a little bit when explaining, why I created the journal for myself. I created it for my clients and for you, the community that are listening to the Recruit the Employer podcast. But this journal, let me give you a couple little specs about it. So first of all, if you've been following me for a while, you know that I love the color Cabernet, as in Cabernet wine. And so I said, well, my first iteration of this journal, because we did a very limited run. So if you are interested in it, we only have limited copies, and I highly recommend going soon to our website to get it, because I know that they will run out. But the specs on this are, it had to be a color Cabernet, right? So it's a linen cover, Cabernet linen cover, gold foil lettering. So it looks really professional, really nice pages in it. The pages are numbered, because I hate when pages are not numbered. And there is a guide in here. We give you examples of how to use the journal. We give you a key on what our weekly reflection pages look like. So we give you kind of instructions on how to use it. It's about 5 by 7. So I mentioned, that's like perfect to go into your purse. It's designed to be transportable. So when people are going to start, hopefully, please Jesus, moving around more, right? We're traveling more. Maybe business travel is going to kick up a little bit more. You can easily bring this with you, and it's not going to weigh a lot. Like when we were weighing it to figure out shipping and whatnot, it's like less than a pound. So it is a very compact journal that's enough space that you can write things out, but not so much space that you're lugging around this big, huge thing. And then the 3 sections that we have in here is first the clarity section, which I'm going to get into a little bit. The second are the weekly plan and reflection pages. And then the third part is emotions at work. And so that's just a page for you to process through all of your emotions. There's a prompted page there for you to do that. So the 3, again, are clarity. So giving you prompted questions and guided questions around how to get clarity in your career. The second is weekly planning and reflection pages, which I'm going to talk about. And finally, the last piece of the puzzle is the emotions at work, where you just freely write on that page all the things that you're feeling. One thing I would recommend is don't leave it out. If you are going to write bad about your boss, don't keep it probably on your desk so they can ask you and look through it. Would not recommend that. So one of the things that I would say that whenever you're going to the first section of this, so this is who this is for, right? So this is for if you're newer seasons in your career, if you're valuing personal development and professional development, male or female, though definitely the female is going to be probably a little bit more interested. And if you're confused about your next career step, or you just want to get a little bit more clarity on what you're doing next. In the clarity section of this journal, we have a very strategic guided questions to help you understand, to first evaluate where you're at in your career, what's working, what's not working. Okay. Very specific questions, guided questions and prompts for you to think about. And it's going to make you think. I'm going to make you think about your career. So set aside the time, grab a glass of wine, grab a cocktail, grab a coffee cup, grab some tea, whatever your beverage, cozy beverage of choice is. It's going to make this fun for you. Grab that and set aside some time to do it. Okay. So that's the first section, is evaluate where you're at in your career. Second is dream about what you want to do next. So many of you have stopped dreaming in your career. If you're listening to this, I want to hear an amen on the other side, right? So many of you have stopped dreaming about what you want to do next. And I've asked you some questions in this section to help you dream again. One example of a question in this section is, what are you doing when you're thriving and in the zone? And then one other question is, be ridiculous. What sounds like a really fun career right now? And why does that sound fun? I'm going to have you dig deep. You may not know the answer immediately, but that's going to prompt you to start thinking about it. That's the whole goal. And then finally, based off the first and second section, so evaluate and dream, we're going to discern your next move and get clarity on what's happening next. So again, very guided questions to help you synthesize what looks like the next best avenue to take. What's the industry? What's the type of company? What's the type of job that you want to be a part of? This journal is going to help you start to understand it a little bit more and piece together those puzzle pieces. And once you're done with that, you also have, so that's the first section, is really around getting clarity. The second section is those weekly reflection and planning pages. So it's a one-pager, and I'm going to tell you the 6 things that we have on every single week that I want you to be doing. At the beginning of the week, I want you to sit down 5 minutes in the morning. What's your Monday method? We explain to you what the Monday method is. We're going to be talking about it in 2 weeks, but we explain it in the journal about what the Monday method is. And if you've been in my community for a while, you know I've talked about this. It's about planning something fun for your Mondays. Number 2 is to network with. So I'm going to network with who, or I'm going to connect with who. It's for you to pick about 2 to 3 people that you're going to network with that week. So you're starting this at the beginning of the week, you're planning it out, and then you're going to have this week's goal. So I would put 1 or 2 goals. Do not make it complicated. 1 Monday method, who you're going to network with, this week's goals. It's reminding you every single week. You do that 5 minutes, 10 minutes on your Monday morning. And then at the end of the week, you reflect on your week. And the questions that we ask are, what are your work wins? What's your favorite failure? And what's next week's goal? Okay? What's next week's goal? It is undated. We have 52 pages of this. So you have a whole year. You get this journal, you can use it for a whole year. So you're going to reflect on, what are my 2 work wins? What's my favorite failure? What did I fail at this week and what did I learn from it? What is next week's goal? And at the bottom, we ask you a question. We give you a bunch of different emotions and we say, what's the main feeling you had this week at work? Were you on fire, nervous, embarrassed, disappointed, confused, tired, excited? And what's beautiful about this is if you've been at the job for, 6 months or so and you've had frustrated and annoyed every single week, you probably want to reflect on why you're still there. So this is why this journal is so great. It's going to help you understand what you're feeling at work and what you need to do next. It's going to make you more aware. Instead of just running through your career, hoping something falls in your lap, you're going to be more strategic. This journal is going to help you take back control of your career. And I want that for you. So it's very simple, right? I do not want this to be complicated. You don't need to have 5 different goals and sub goals and 10 other goals underneath that. It's like, what's my 1 week goal? What's next week's goal? What did I fail at this week? What did I win at this week? Who am I going to network with? And where did I spend some time for myself? That's it. That's all I want you to be focused on. And I can guarantee if you do that, you're going to have revelations about where you want to go in your career next and what you're really good at. And that's amazing. And then finally, the last section is the permission to have emotions around work. So we provide you some prompts where one of them says, write about the work overwhelm with periods in between. And the other one we said is, need to give yourself a pep talk this week, be your own cheerleader and write about those emotions at work. Another one of the ones we said is, stress got you, boss annoying you, journal through it. And again, the goal is for you to start to process through your emotions so you can let them out. Right? Writing stuff down really helps us get clarity. It helps us process through things. And ultimately, it's going to lead us to be more successful, more clear, and just happier at work. And that is really the goal. So again, we have a very limited run of this. So if you're interested in this and you're like, wow, I really, really need this, I want you to go today to recruittheemployer.com/journal before we run out of these journals. I really, really want you to do that. We're going to be doing some promotions later this month. So we're hoping we're not going to run out before that. So we wanted to make sure we gave it to this community first, but we're going to be starting some really big promotions that is going to get more people in the door and purchasing this. So make sure you do that now. All right. And so we talked a little bit about, why is journaling important? We talked about why I created the career map journal. We talked about what's in the journal. Now, what I want to do is share with you about what I learned from this experience. And it was quite a learning experience for me. It's actually funny. I had this first idea for this journal years ago when my company was still a side hustle and we weren't Recruit the Employer, right? I was just Jenna, just Jenna. And I had this idea and I had, thought about it for a while, and I kind of started engaging a designer, and I just wasn't ready. Honestly, I just wasn't ready. And I really didn't know what I wanted it to be. And I'm actually really grateful that I waited until this far into my career, because now I actually know what people need. I know what women struggle with. I know what they are frustrated about, and I know how to solve for that problem. And I know what questions to ask to help them, gain clarity or to find a solution, right? Just a really great question asker now. It's not really useful in a lot of other industries, but it's useful here. So the career map journal was birthed a long time ago, but it didn't happen until this year. And it's actually funny. I had a girlfriend of mine who called me randomly. This is when I first started dating my husband, and it was a friend of his. And obviously now we're all friends, but she called me and she said, "You're going to think this is so weird." She didn't know this about me. She said, "You're going to think this is so weird, but I had this dream about you. And I felt like the Lord was saying, it's in the journal. It's in your shop." And I was like stunned, because I had been pondering like picking it back up again to pick up like, I really need to work on that. I really need to create that product. But I was so overwhelmed at the idea of creating a physical product. I had told myself the lie that it's too hard. So when you talk about like, what lies are you telling yourself? That was a lie that I told myself for a really long time, that creating and launching a physical product was going to be too hard. It's going to be too complicated. I can't do it. I feel so overwhelmed by it. Like, I just kept telling myself the narrative. And she had this dream that she had no idea that I was even thinking about. We just met, She's like, "You're going to think I'm crazy, but I felt like the Lord was saying it's in the journal. It's in the shop." So I listened to that and I ignored it again for another year. The resistance was real, friends. The resistance was real. So when I talk to you about mindset stuff, I'm always still working through it myself. I am not perfect in it. And I want to give you permission to say that it's going to be a lifelong process of uncovering the lies that you're believing, right? And pushing through that. But I think self-awareness is really the key to it. So I waited another year, and it was about the end of last year that I was like, it's time. This is one of my goals in my business that one of the questions that I ask in the journal is like, if you knew that you only had, 6 months left in your career, what would you do differently? So I think that's an important question for just us to ask as business owners and people, like, if giving ourselves a time frame, like, what would we do differently if we know we had a finite amount of time? And one of those questions that I asked myself was one of the answers that I came up with was I needed to create this journal. I needed to do that. That was something that was really important to me. And so I engaged a designer. And, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a designer, there's a printer, there's a distributor. There's all these different pieces of the puzzle. You got to set up a Shopify. You've got to create the photos for it. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces. And I really did think I was going to get it out by February, y'all. It's May. It's May. So from a timeline perspective, I failed at that. That's not my biggest failure in this project. But one of the things that I learned is it's okay if it takes longer than you think. I learned a lot about how my communication style needed to get better. I learned that creating a physical product is no joke. It was hard, but it's doable. And I have it in my hands now, and I get to share it with other people. And so when we got the big shipment in with a gentleman from FedEx, and he was like, "Girl, what do you have in here? You have like 700 pounds of what is this in here? Why am I bringing this to your house?" Because I didn't want to drop it off. I work in a really small, quaint town in a little bit south of Nashville called Franklin, Tennessee. And they're old buildings, and it would just been a pain in the butt to try and get somebody to coordinate and all that kind of stuff. So I said, well, my husband and I are just going to have to, first get it here at an apartment and bring 700 pounds worth of stuff into our office. And so, oh man, guys. So he brought it in, and Brent looked at me, and we had them all stacked up in my spare bedroom. And so I'm opening them up. And I was really excited about it, really proud of it. And I sent off some screenshots to my mom. And a couple of weeks later, she sent me a screenshot back of a typo. Y'all, there's a typo in my journal. So at first, and this is just me telling you transparently, because I'm just being honest, I screwed up, right? So it falls on me. I could blame the designer. I could blame, somebody else. I could blame a bunch of different people. But at the end of the day, it's my responsibility. We had 3 people review it, look at it backwards. We did multiple checks over, and we still miss something. And so what I first did, was do the normal, right? The normal Jenna, oh my goodness, sinking back into scarcity mindset, thinking I was worthless. I started berating myself. You're so dumb. How could you do that? You can't sell this. Oh my gosh, people are going to think you're so stupid. You're a fraud. I went there, friends, because I had so much built into this. I had some capital built into it. We had to order them first before, we get any money from anybody else, right? We have overhead. I'm not used to that. My dad used to call me the cash flow queen because we had a service-based business and we didn't have a ton of overhead. And so I was just beating myself up, y'all. I don't know if you've ever been there before. My guess is that you probably have. And I was just beating myself up. And I realized though, I kind of had, after my little meltdown and after talking to, a coach friend of mine, a PR friend of mine, and a couple of my clients and asked them what their opinion was, I realized that I had a great learning opportunity because I talk in this journal about celebrating your failures and not being afraid of failure. And I made a failure. I made a made a boo-boo in my journal. I screwed up. Okay. I screwed up. But then I really reflected on why I created this journal. It's to encourage other professionals to show up more authentically in their careers and to celebrate their wins and learn from their failures. And if I wasn't going to use this opportunity to show you guys how I'm doing this real time, then I was missing out. And I was doing you guys a disservice to make you think that I was perfect. And I'm not. I'm not perfect. I screwed up. So you have permission to own your mistakes too. And I just really want to encourage you that failure doesn't mean that you're a fraud. Failure doesn't mean that you've now proven everybody in your imaginary brain that you thought was against you correct. It means you messed up and that you learned from it and now you would do it again. So the thing that I learned is have 5 different people check it backwards, forwards, 15 times. And if still then where's a mistake? Nothing I can do about it. But my friend TJ Leffler, who you guys have heard me talk about before, and I've had him on the podcast, we'll link to that conversation in the show notes from early parts of this podcast when it was still your career story. He said, you got to lean into it. You just got to lean into it because there's a real learning opportunity to give people permission that it's okay to not be perfect. And I'm not perfect. And this career map journal is not perfect, but it's going to help you get the results that you need. So to celebrate my mistake, because I am going to celebrate my failure. It's my favorite failure. It's super embarrassing. Okay. It was embarrassing. My mom found it. All the embarrassing, right? So to celebrate my mistake, I'm actually going to give away our networking templates, a $49 value, away to anyone who purchases the career map journal and finds the typo. Okay. So we're going to celebrate this mistake. And it's going to be a reminder for you that it's okay to make mistakes. So for anyone who purchases the Career Map Journal, you're going to get the networking templates, a $49 value for free. The journal, by the way, is only $20. So what a win, right? And if you find the typo, you can either DM me on LinkedIn or email me a picture at support@recruittheemployer.com. And if you find it, I will give you that for free. We're just going to celebrate it. We're going to lean into it, as my friend TJ said, because I am not exempt from mistakes. Neither are you. And that is totally normal. Whether you're the top, person at the top dog at the company, whether you're, young in the company, it's all about how you overcome. It's all about how you move forward. And I'm just really excited, regardless of the mistake, that I'm here to present to you today, the Career Map Journal. It is officially live. You can officially buy it, mistakes and all. But we do only have a limited copies that we're selling. So yeah, we need you to get it today. If you're interested in it, we would love to have you get access to the Career Map Journal to help you take your career to the next level. So again, if you're interested in it, we're going to talk about it a little bit tomorrow on the podcast, but I just appreciate you guys for showing up, for encouraging me. And I would love to hear what your biggest takeaway was from this conversation. I would love to have you purchase the Career Map Journal. Again, you can find that at recruittheemployer.com/journal. And we're just going to celebrate today. We're going to celebrate the official launch of the Career Map Journal. All right, I will see you guys tomorrow. Thanks for listening to the Recruit the Employer podcast. If you've been loving this podcast and it's been helping you approach your career in a brand new way, I have 2 shameless asks. Number 1, make sure you hit subscribe right this very second. That way you won't miss a single episode. And number 2, would you give us a review? Reviews help other ambitious career women like you know that this podcast is the place to be and helps the podcast climb to the top of the charts. Think of it as some good career karma. And as always, if you want to learn more about the topics we discussed today or are ready to take massive action and invest in yourself and your career, we would be honored to help you. Head on over to recruittheemployer.com/call to book your free strategy session. Regardless, we will see you next week.